Oh, hello everyone. So nice to see so many people join us today. What a nice thing to do for a coffee break, right? I'm Pepper, by the way, and I'm happy to introduce the first webinar of the HARD series that will be hosted here in SoftBank Robotics Europe. You will hear all about the present and the future of social robotics. So, I'll let the floor to our moderator, Miriam, to tell you more about it. Please enjoy.
Thank you, Pepper. I'm also excited to welcome you all in our first HARD webinar. We will address a lot of topics today, the recent developments as well as the future of social robotics, affective computing, and many more. We'd also love to hear from you during this webinar. If you have a question for our speakers, please feel free to send it in the Q&A chat at the bottom. We'll be answering the questions at the end. And finally, I'm pleased to announce and welcome our speakers, Joanna, Chloe, and Victor.
Hi. Hello, everybody. We enter into the scene. Yes.
Welcome once more. So, Joanna recently reached the position of Head of Research at Strat School of Design. She's also in charge of a master's program, Design for Smart Cities, and the Robotics by Design Lab. She's also teaching courses on design and robotics and co-directs several PhD projects. Joanna, based on your impressive experience, can you explain your vision on design importance in social robotics?
Yes. So thank you, Miriam. Hello, everybody. I'm super happy to be with you today and with my colleague, with Chloe and Victor. And so, yeah, it's quite a very broad question. So I only have 2 minutes to answer it, but I'll try to give some introduction about Strat. So Strat is a private school. We have 26 years old, and we form designers in 5 years. In different fields, okay? So it's about industrial design. And since 2007, we work on robots, on robotics and AI. Actually, we also created the term robjects, which are intelligent everyday objects, but with some kind of a AI inside, like a chair or a trash bin, etc. And so since that time, since 2007, we try to do design on robotics and then design research. I arrived at Strat 7 years ago, and my first project was actually a project with SoftBank Robotics, a big consortium, national consortium called Romeo. And therefore, I start to understand what is this field of social robotics, and more precisely on socially assistive robotics, which are a specific part. And I hope I can define it at some point today. So right now, my answer for you, Miriam, is how design and designers could give some insights on robotics. It's the fact that the hard skills and the soft skills of design. That means that designers, they know how to organize field studies, they know how to observe, they know how to talk to people, and then they start to iterate, yeah, to bring concepts. They start to make prototypes, to test these prototypes, and to even invent new ways of exploring these prototypes and scenarios, okay, in the real life. So actually, what is challenging for us as designer in robotics, that we don't really know what means to live with a robot, because we don't have robots in our lives and in our homes and in our schools. Yeah. So the idea is to invent these environments where we can test and prototypes life with these intelligent machines. Okay. So I hope this is my first answer. I will give another answer, but later on.
Thank you, Joanna. I'm looking forward to hear more later on. Next speaker is Chloe. So Chloe is a professor in affective computing at Telecom Paris, where she coordinates the social computing topic and is a member of a Greta team. Her research is developed around audio and text mining applications, and deals with interactions between humans and virtual agents. And as if that wasn't enough, she also published recently a book. So Chloe, can you briefly describe the main idea behind your new book, Opinion Analysis During Interaction, and how these methods can be applied to human-robot interaction?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for this invitation. And in order to answer your question, Miriam, the idea of the book is to give an overview of natural language processing methods in human-agent interaction, and in particular, natural language processing methods that are dedicated to the analysis of socio-emotional behaviors. What I mean by socio-emotional behavior is all the behaviors that corresponds to moods, sentiments, opinions, attitudes, emotions, social stance. So there is a lot of socio-emotional behaviors that are very important in a human agent and human robot interaction, because they have to understand the user's social behavior, social-emotional behavior, and in particular, if you want that the users enjoy her or his interaction with the robot, you need to detect, the robot need to detect when the users express frustration towards interaction, also when he or she expresses boredom towards interaction, because if you cannot detect it, you cannot have fluid and natural interactions. So this is the topic of the book, and in this book I focus on one modality, which is the verbal modality, so how it is expressed in the language, with correlation also with the prosody and intonation of the voice, so how we can analyze all this information coming from speech during an interaction with the robot.
Very interesting. Thank you, Chloe. And the last speaker is my colleague, Victor. He's an R&D software engineer here at SoftBank Robotics Europe for almost 11 years. He recently graduated with a PhD at Sorbonne University, demonstrating that users at home can teach new behaviors to robots using spoken language. His work ranged from developing tools and SDKs to help users become wizards of robotics, to making robots' cognitive system more powerful. Victor, you had an opportunity to participate in Pepper at Home, SoftBank's internal program with a goal to collect feedback and new ideas for apps, new features, and so on, that actually allowed you to have a robot at home. So what did you learn from this project? How was the experience?
Thanks, Miriam, for the question. Hello, everybody. That was a really interesting project. I still have the robot at home. And at the beginning, you're really amazed by having that sort of living creature at home that can talk to you and that can maybe answer questions and wake you up in the morning. But actually, you really quickly figure it all out and realize that the robot does not get it, actually. The interaction is not as deep as it should, and you understand that it's a machine doing the program it's programmed for, And so that was actually the motivation of my PhD thesis, was to teach new behaviors to the robots, so that the robot can evolve with time. So really giving the tools to the robot to behave like you expect. Actually, it's not that easy. We did prototypes like that with very simple programming interfaces. But what you would really need is to have the robot understand your surroundings, understand your home a bit, and be able to talk about your home, talk about your habits, talk about the social interaction you're actually expecting from it. So actually that was, I think, most of the best takeaways I could have, is to have an opportunity to test these programs, these algorithms, and making a cognitive system that is able to do that, to learn from user instructions, mostly by speech, and do that in a very open-ended manner, because we cannot predict what is happening in a home. And even though I'm living with a robot, I still don't know exactly what's the next feature I would think I would like to ask. And seeing this experiment on several users having the robot at home, because we were something like 20 to have the robot, is actually really refreshing, because you can see the variety of expectations people have for a robot like that.
Thank you, Victor. I think a lot of participants are dreaming of an experience like this. So let's start with our webinar. Actually, today we'll talk a lot about social robots. So a good question to start would be, what makes a robot social?
I can start. I think that we have all different parts of the I think that it's best. It could be great if everyone could answer to this question, because I think that we have very different view. So I will just first focus on one aspect, so that the robot could be social, is the one that I discussed also when I was presenting, the way or how we can analyze the user's social-emotional behavior and provide good answers accordingly. So develop the social skills of the robot. And I think it was also what Victor said earlier. He says also that when we have long-term interaction, we need to have a user profile, and so that the robot is able to analyze the preferences and to have some information about the likes and dislikes of the users. Such information is contained on the user's iterance during its interaction with the robot. So I think the robot social skills is one of the main, the key functionalities the robot should have.
I can take next. For me, which I'm taking it from a technical point of view a bit, I can see we have a lot of algorithms in robots to do like planning, to have a robot achieve things to do in the physical world. We can see a lot of examples like that in industry. And the social aspect, the social robotics, is really where the human is in that loop, is actually doing something for the human or with the human. For instance, if you take the example of explaining something to a human, let's say the robot knows something, has to explain it to a human. Well, it's not that easy. You have to catch the human's attention, tell things, make sure the human understands, and all of these little things that occur in that explanation are going to be social actions, will be actually social interaction that are not so easy to understand. So the social robotics are robots capable of understanding this and leveraging it to create social interaction.
Maybe I will try to answer from another point of view and through another perspective. First of all, to define a little bit the concept that was born 15 years ago, which is a socially assistive robotics. So researchers at that point defined a specific field, which was, so why? To create social applications for better assistance, that means for people that were in treatment, and for rehabilitation or kind of a learning, convalescence. So the social part was an important mean for the rehabilitation process. This robot for children, for example, in a hospital, it helped them to better live the experience in the hospital. Okay, so this was one thing that I wanted to share with you. And then on the other side, for us, and it's a political point of view, okay, as a designer, for us, a social robot is what makes a person social. To explain myself, a social robot is something, it's a mean for us to open to the world, okay? And from social robot, I will talk about social experience, okay? I will talk about how people, and maybe the robot is one mediator, how people make society together, and what is the role of this technology, okay? Maybe the robot for one person, it's some kind of interface to help develop well-being, etc. But maybe in a hospital or in a nursing home, the social robot is something between persons. Okay, so it also it's difficult for me to define what is a social robot, because it depends a lot on the context. Okay, whether it's rehabilitation, whether it's about learning, whether it's about well-being or having fun. Okay, so it's always this is a design point of view. It's always connected to the context and the environment. And then I think what Chloe and Victor, they bring some bricks in how to make this possible. Okay, so this is a little bit how I understand this notion.
Exactly.
Thank you all. It's very interesting, and actually it kind of brings us to one of the next questions. So you already mentioned some. What are currently the biggest technical and design challenges in social robotics? Actually, we've seen great advances in different fields of social robotics, but do you think there's a key ingredient to make a truly socially intelligent robot?
I could answer that. First, we need something where you have a system that is flexible enough so to learn new behaviors. For instance, so every time we discuss with between humans, we're actually always negotiating the way we discuss. We always trying to agree on how the conversation will take place, if everybody is still in the conversation, etc. And there is a lot of adaptation. And since we have a lot of algorithms that exist out there for learning things, for understanding social cues, again like that, but to make a cognitive system that actually includes that in the loop of what the robot should do, and actually become flexible enough to adapt, is a huge challenge. I think it would be like the graal somehow of making a real robot understanding, really understanding social interaction. But we're building and we're going towards that by adding bricks like that, at least that loop, and trying to get skills more and more into the robot and into real situations.
And what do you think, how far are we from there? Where do you see human-robot interaction in a couple of years?
Oh, I cannot tell exactly, but I can really think that I don't know. I hope that in 10 years the robot gets it somehow.
May I add something?
Sure.
In fact, I think that what Victor mentions is that in human-human interactions, you have these co-constructions that you have when you are speaking, when two humans are speaking together. And in human-robot interactions, we are still looking at the users, how to detect social-emotional behavior or users' behavior, and how to generate believable and socially believable and also relevant behavior on the side of the robots. And in fact, there are still difference in terms of understanding between a human and a robot. And it seems that we try to reproduce human-human interactions, but sometimes there are this asymmetry between the human and the robot that is not always taken into account, because they have not the same capabilities. And in terms of machine learning algorithms, it means also to try to define and to develop methods that allows to take into account asymmetrical and also sequential interactions. So I think this is a direction. I don't know if it's the direction in 10 years, but I think that it is a direction that the research should take for the next research. But maybe Joanna has an idea, because I think that there is maybe some things in design that could answer to this question.
all things are important. Appearance is important, functioning is important, the behavior is important, the role, a specific role that people give, which is in coherence of how the designers of the robot gave, it's important. So all of these are important, but maybe the key is not in the same time. That means we saw that some researchers talked about short-term interaction, and Victor, you also saw what is important when you bring your robot at home for the first time, when you bring your robot in a hospital for the first time. It's super important, the wow effect, the appearance, it's important, the voice, it's important, how it moves a little bit, it's important. This makes this perceived experience. Okay, then when you try and you have it near you, it's what this robot does for you. Okay, how it interferes in your life. Is it really giving you some benefits or not? So it's on the longer part. Other parts are important than functionality, how it really avoids failure. So I'm not talking about a super robot that goes super well, but avoiding failure. Okay, this is something very interesting, subtle, avoiding failure. And then this is my first part of this point. And the second one is related to the context that I already talked about. I'm sorry, I will repeat myself, and the ecosystem. That means that when we design a robot for people in a hospital, we should design a robot for the people taking care of the people. That means that it's so complex that means we have to design these machines being able to be manipulated by lots of stakeholders in the ecosystem. Okay, maybe the families of the patient, maybe the person who cleans the room. Okay, everybody at some point interacts with the robot. And it's not only the patient, okay? We design robots for patient, but finally the other people are using them, okay? So it's about this, the global ecosystem, which can also bring some key in how we design the robots, okay? Maybe we will form next developers for nursing homes, I don't know. We can imagine new types of skills for the people who are dealing with patients, okay? And robots for people who don't.
Very interesting, thank you. So I wanted to ask actually one more question about this present of social robotics. So you mentioned that there's a lot of new research on this topic, and having well-defined metrics and standards proved to be very important in fields like computer vision to both keep the track of progress and increase research interest. Do we have these standards and metrics in social robotics?
So I can start to answer. In social robotics, it depends what you want to evaluate. If you want to evaluate the success of an interaction, we have questionnaires that we have at the end of a human-robot interactions in order to question the user in order on the engagement that he had during the interaction, and on the sentiment of presence of the robot that he had during an interaction, in order to see if the robot's social behavior seems to have improved the interaction or not. In terms of detecting user social emotional behavior, we want to know if the robot, if the system is able to detect correctly the social emotional behavior as they occur in interaction. And in computer vision, you have evaluation metrics, as you mentioned, but in natural language processing also, when you build machine learning or deep learning models of an emotions, or you can evaluate how correct are the prediction, the system predictions. But the question is that the robot should not meet the relevant information. So I think that we should wait also the evaluation and to consider the context in human agent of the human robot interaction. And I think what is missing in the evaluation, but also in computer vision, I think, is to provide evaluation that take into account the human-robot context, and also maybe in the directions that Joanna mentioned earlier. It depends also on the, sorry, I will reformulate with my words, on the application context, and because I think that in a hospital it's really important to be to have a good prediction, maybe, I don't know, of a certain type of emotion categories, and to have a good model of a certain type of emotion categories, and also I think that there are a lot of dimensions to evaluate, also the timing of the detection, and so I think that there is a huge work to do in terms of evaluation in human robot in the context of human robot interaction.
I can also add that there are questionnaires that, like Chloe said, some questionnaires are used to evaluate the quality of the interaction afterwards. These are things that you can see in psychology. For example, there is the usability measurement, usability score, SUS, that can be done, and it's used for software or games, things like that, to check whether it's easy to use the robot, for instance. And there is also the NASA TLX, the Godspeed questionnaires. There's actually a large variety of questionnaires like that, and it really depends on the task you're asking. Is it a task that you give to the user? Is it the quality of the interaction? Is it how much the user liked it, or how much the user got it? Depending on all these forms of interactions, you may need different questionnaires and different metrics.
And maybe it depends also on the robot that you're working on. I mean, the questionnaires and all these things, if it could be great to have a database of questionnaires on paper, on now, etc., etc. I think this is what the research community should do, iterate on that. So I learned from my colleagues on this part, because maybe we are more naive on this thing, and sometimes we try to build our own way of understanding the subject and creating our own tools and spaces of experimentation. What is interesting from the design point of view is, again, building, for example, the living lab, a living lab. That means a place where you really live, even if it's fake. It's a fake robot. It's not. It doesn't have the intelligence that you would like you to. But what is the distance? Okay, what is the distance when you're talking to a person? What distance a robot should be approaching you in order for you to see it and then to respond to it, or show that you don't want to respond to it. Okay, so all these things should be also in a physical place, and maybe our tools and measures are not quantitative enough. That's why I think it's working with you, with more scientific experts who could help us to understand what we are really doing, and to understand the values that we bring through this field experimentation, who are more into the wild experimentation. But I think that it brings some knowledge on this. Okay. So
yeah, it's very interesting that you mention the real life experience. That brings us to the next topic of research and industry. One advantage for academic researchers when working close to the industry is having access to these real use cases, where the environment and settings are different from lab experiences. What else does the industry offer to research, and how can researchers and industry in general benefit from each other the best?
So if I can answer to this, this is my second answer to the first question on design, how design and robotics can work together. Actually, my second answer is that design is bigger than us. This was some phrase that we had some time ago here at Strat. That means that we understood that design is efficient in terms of creating scenarios, in terms of starting to create prototypes, but it could be powerful if we join with researchers in AI, with sociologists, with psychologists, and with other disciplines, okay? So in order to be really to understand this field, which is so complex and it's about living together, we created a lab in December last year, in December 2019, which is called Robotics by Design. That means that it's not only about design, it's about how other disciplines and design could make projects together. So it's a common laboratory with 5 industrial partners, a design agent consultancy, and then 3 academic partners and 4 PhD students that start PhD right now. And these people, these PhD students are in sociology, psychology, design, AI, and robotics. So each of them hybrid, each of them strange in their disciplines, because really into two disciplines. But I really believe that this is, it's very challenging, but this is the way, it's a tentative to try to bring some knowledge who is transdisciplinary. This is also about not rest in your own discipline, but a knowledge who is for the field, also from the industry, that are questioning us, the researchers. How I do, what I do with this, what's my position on this? So it's called Robotics, AI, and Humans, Ecologies of Living Together. So this is how we tackle this for 4 years.
From computational science, I can just testify how the collaboration with industrials are working when we are working on social robotics. I think that you mentioned, Miriam, that the data, sharing data, and maybe Joanna complete with sharing also relevance and of the study and what is important in terms of application, but also I remember when we were working together with SoftBank, I remember that one very important collaboration was also on how to make a scenario in order to using a paper, and how to really evaluate. I think that also the question of evaluation that you mentioned earlier is exactly the type of research that could be done both with the collaboration between industrials and academics, because from the machine learning point of view and computational science, because I think it's a little bit different, the evaluation, what we mean behind the evaluation in that sense, is that evaluation is very is done in machine learning in a way that is not satisfactory from my point of view. For example, when you want to make some language generation, for example, for a robot, so that a robot generate automatically a language in its answer, you have this type of evaluation of blue score that just see if it corresponds to the expected utterance, but a relevant utterance is not always exactly, it could not be just one utterance. There could be a lot of relevant utterances. So this is just an example on how metrics are used in machine learning and how they are not relevant in social robotics. And I think that industrials can help to better design such evaluation metrics according to the application, according to also the type of the robot, and because for example, SoftBank Robotics knows it's robots. We don't know as much as SoftBank Robotics how the robot is running. So I think this is really important that in social robotics there is this collaboration between industrials for these reasons.
Yes, I hope my sound is okay. Let me know if there is a problem. Yes, so I visited the two sides of it since I was in the industry before entering the academy a bit. I was always a bit expecting more from the research to be applied on real use cases. It's really important what the research is happening, what the research community is doing on finding out new algorithms. Everything is really good, but for the social interaction, if we want to take it in total, like really all together with all the algorithms together inside a machine, it's difficult to study. It's difficult to find results in the community. My focus was to deploy a system in the real life in people's homes, also because that's not so frequent yet. So I think in the research, as the research will tend to try to go into the wild, really having robots there and gathering data and making studies with actual people living, using the robot for something useful, for real, I mean, that will really help matching with the industry, because the industry is trying to have these robots there as soon as possible and have them be useful as soon as possible. And the conditions would be too different if we had in the industry robots deployed in the wild, and in research it's just closed in the lab. So I think just going into the wild is a very good way to get closer to the industry, and the industry can help the research to get the robots out there.
Thank you. I'd like to switch to a new topic, affective computing, one field that will for sure be part of the future of social robotics, and you actually mentioned it multiple times regarding emotion recognition importance and social behavior understanding. For those who are not familiar with the field, Chloe, can you briefly describe what is affective computing and what are the most recent breakthroughs, and how do they impact the field of social robotics?
Sure. So yes, affective computing research domain is born with the book of Rosalind Picard in order to define what is affective computing. And I think that at the first step of this research domain, affective computing has focused on detection of basic emotions, the big six of Ekman that we can see on the picture here with vice versa, the movie. We were so we in this research domain, the first studies were how can we do some. How can we give the machine the ability to deal with emotions? So this was this idea, and now the research domain has evolved, because I think that depending on the application, depending on the types of the data, on the interaction context, we are not facing the big six. In fact, when you are studying, for example, human-robot interactions in a train station, for example, you don't have fear, not a lot. You don't have. So the idea was to extend also the scope of the phenomena that were studied with social stances. Mixed emotions, and this question of affective computing has focused now on a broader set of emotions. And also because first the domain was studied more active data. And also, this is a question on when you go into the wild, as Victor said, into the wild, you don't have these big six emotions. And so affective computing is a research domain that has evolved to this social computing and affective computing. And but that has kept this idea of giving the machine kind of emotional and socio-emotional intelligence.
Thank you. I'd also like to ask you about the personalization of the robots. According to your research or the studies that you encountered, is it more desirable that a robot at home has a personality or just performs a certain tasks?
For sure, everybody would like their robot to be exactly how they want. For sure, it's really important that personalization occurs. That's actually a driving force of my own research. We want to be able to tell the robot these things. And so there are a lot of approaches, and just for me, at a higher level, being able to explain what we expect to the robot, using words to do that, for me would be the best for me. But in general, you can see that there are a lot of works on proactivity and trying to adapt to whatever the user needs. And we can really see in the research that people prefer those kind of robots. So for me, it's kind of proven that people want that.
It's a little bit, it's a tricky question for us, because we also saw that in some cases people don't know what they want. I mean, this is sometimes we go in the field saying, okay, we're gonna really try to find out the perfect application by doing this interviews, etc. But we are working on something so new here, which is so strange, which is so out of our it's part of our imaginary with lots of expectation, and in the same time it's so far away from our reality, and this tension, it's difficult. So okay, I understand that this type of research is done on robots that already exist, okay, and maybe then talk about personalization in order to make it broader and to make it like more interesting. But what about robots that don't exist yet? And how from the beginning we ask the right question on how to create this thing, if we'll create a thing at the end. So again, becoming from the perspective of the field, why do we need, okay? Mm-hmm. Why do we need to do that? And why a robot? And why not something else? Okay. So yeah, it's for me. I reinterpret the question. Okay, it's not easy to respond.
No, it's true. I agree with you. Unfortunately, I will have to stop us here because it's time for a Q&A session. So let's see what our participants have as a question. Small technical problems, as usual.
In the meantime, it made me think about the use cases that we could love to have. And personally, I would love to have a butler robot. I mean, that's kind of a movie style robot, but that's the ultimate one for me.
What is it called? Rosie? Rose? Okay, let's start with the questions. So I have a question for all of you. I can imagine that by investigating the social aspect of robots, one is forced to really understand what makes a human social, first of all. What is something interesting, funny that you have learned or realized about humans and human interactions by studying robots?
Super question, thank you.
Yeah.
So if I may, I would like to answer this question, because actually from all the 5 years, I worked on a Romeo project, going with lots of robots from software, others that we designed here at Strat, in hospitals and nursing homes. Actually, I learned more about humans than about robots. And I learned that actually what people want is to take care of themselves, for us to take care of them and not to be lonely. And we talk about success. We can also ask ourselves, what is a successful social robot, okay? What really means that we are happy and go home and said, I know what I'm doing in this world. It's a really value. And when you spend a week in a nursing home, you come home and say, I don't know if social robotics is really how we want to do something for these people, okay? In the same times, what I can say from the field is that some people in rehabilitation centers, they are okay in their lives, they have lots of activities, and finally having an autonomous paper in their room for 1 week, it was there, but it didn't really bring something else because they were so busy with their treatment. But on those who were extremely lonely, they were super happy that they had researchers and developers with them in the room, talking about their daily condition and trying to understand what we can do for them. So being interested in the person is what I learned. And then that also this machine, this robot can make these people forget that they are disabled. And there it was this young boy in a wheelchair and said, okay, I have this robot here and people no longer talk about my handicap. They talk about the robot. This is wonderful. So we decentralize, okay, on the stereotypes and how we see people. And maybe this is, again, this mediator position of robotics. Again, this position I told you about. Robots are just a prosthesis, a social prosthesis towards the other, okay? And once this connection is done, maybe robots go home and we leave people live together, okay?
I can just add something because it's very brief on the way on the funny thing that I noticed, but it was about humans' behavior in front of the robot. I was surprised that humans are very, very polite with the robots, and sometimes when the robot is not understanding, and sometimes they really try to do something, and when they want to leave, they don't leave such as this. They look at their watch. They try to send signs of on the way, such as the robot would be able to detect such signs. So I think that I was surprised how polite people are towards the robots. So it's just
yeah. His anthropomorphism has a huge role here. Yeah. Let's move on to the next one. So, in some topics, such as prisoner's dilemma, even humans couldn't detect social cues from other humans' behavior intent. And most of the time, they try to solve it with their intuitions. How could that apply to a robot, since it is not something concrete that robots must detect?
So, for instance, the notion of intuition like that, I think it's close to what we are doing with the machine learning, where subtle signals might be able to lead to conclusions. And so a human that is using his intuition to figure out something about another human is actually requiring information and experience. So knowing that given the situation and knowing that given the past experience and my habits and knowing the other humans' habits, I can maybe intuit, have the intuition of what the other human wants or whatever information we'd like to infer. So I think we have the tools to do this kind of inference, to do this kind of intuitive-like reasoning, but actually to apply that on a real case scenario is going to be a huge work. It's not really like that, but technologically, we could do this kind of approaches.
And maybe I can add that it could be the role of cognitive architecture also, because I think this is a kind of perspective taking. I think this is the term that is used for such a phenomenon. Yes, I think that some cognitive models for robots and the architecture for robots are trying to take it into account, but I cannot say more.
Let's move on to the next one. For a school project, we are designing a social robot. The purpose of this robot is to increase the involvement of 6 students in education. Based on your expertise, can you name aspects that are extra relevant to this design process? In addition, the question of how you can best convey emotion through a social, unfortunately, I don't see the end.
Robot, a social
yeah.
robot.
Okay.
So I don't understand really the question. Is it about the robotics in order to kind of create a path between the sick students that are at home with those who are in school? Exactly what we do here. We are in a petite couronne, and we have mixed classes between people who are here, people who are at home. They are not sick, but they are COVID contact. In that, there is not, you don't need social robots. You just need a nice interface in order to communicate with your colleagues and with the teacher. Okay, you just need a tool in order to be part of the learning experience. Okay, then if you want to iterate on what is learning experience and what social robotics would bring in this learning experience, then you could go and propose different scenarios where the robot is challenging you with some questions, whatever. I don't know. You really have to ask yourself the right question. Okay, what do you want to do?
Yeah, I assume that especially for early education, a social robot can have a huge impact on learning for kids. Improve, like at least increase the fun in the process.
You say that à la maternelle is not fun to. No, no. Okay. Yes, indeed.
Let's move to the next one. What should be the future function of the robots to interact with other in connected city, people and other products on this city? It's again a question for Joanna, I believe.
But I can leave the other ones. I don't want to monopolize the.
Victor, you have something to add?
I could try. For sure. So there is something I was interesting about was how we store knowledge in the robot. Since I want the robot to get it, how do I save, let's say, information in the mind of the robot? And actually, it's a problem you have for every kind of software programs. You need a database to store and to retrieve information from it. And this database must be interoperable with other databases. So interoperability is really an important matter to make sure that we can have several devices designed by several different manufacturers for different purposes, be able to exchange some information. If you want to be able to do that, you have to define, this is what we call an ontology, to make sure the different devices speak somehow the same language or something compatible, you know. If you really want to make things connected together, it's more a problem of standard of information and exchanging information the right way rather than a connectivity issue or things like that.
Unfortunately, the time has come to end. I really enjoyed today's discussion. Thank you to the speakers and thank you everybody for participating. I for sure had a lot of fun and I'm sure Pepper too. So I just wanted to invite you to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, as you can see on the left. And actually, this is just the first webinar of the series. We plan to organize more. And if you have a topic that you would like to hear about or speakers that you would like to recommend, please use on any social media hashtag HeartSBRE. And maybe you'll see one of your favorite speakers next time.
Yes,
Thank you all.
it's fun. I hope to see you soon.